What was the moment you knew you had to get out of that relationship? My boyfriend of 2.5 years blew me off to hang out with a new female friend the day after my dad passed away. To summarize as best I can, my father suddenly fell into a coma during my junior year of college. I flew out to be with him and my mom, spending about 2 weeks there before the doctors confirmed our worst fears. They told us he was unlikely to ever wake up, and even if he did, he would have severe brain damage, likely blind, mute, and almost completely paralyzed. According to his living will, we made the heartbreaking decision to have him taken off life support. During that time, I wasn't really in contact with anyone from college. I had more important things on my mind. When I finally got back, the first thing I did was go to my boyfriend's room. We were still living in the dorms, to tell him what had happened. I got about 5 minutes into explaining, clearly distraught, when a girl I'd never met before walked in. My boyfriend immediately greeted her and started chatting, as if I wasn't even there. The conversation went on for about 45 minutes, while I sat there in silence, waiting, ignored. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I left, went back to my room, and cried until I fell asleep. The next morning, he knocked on my door. I assumed he was coming to check on me. He wasn't. Instead, he sat me down and told me that I was the reason he never had any fun in college. Of course, it couldn't possibly have anything to do with his 4chan and League of Legends addiction, his nocturnal sleep schedule, or his severe depression. He said things needed to change or we should take a break. We'd been on and off before, so it wasn't completely out of the blue, but this time it hit differently. It made me realize he didn't actually care about me in any real human way I could understand. While I'd been standing by my father's deathbed, he'd been getting drunk and flirting with that same girl. Two things he'd always criticized me for, real or imagined. So I agreed to the break, happily this time. And that was that. Funny thing is, that girl turned out to be completely unhinged. She actually started stalking him a few months later. By then, he was trying to get back together with me. Shamefully, I even considered it for a brief moment, but then he completely lost it when he found out I was applying to grad school. That was when I remembered exactly what a miserable person he really was, and how lucky I was to be done with him. Story 2. I flew out to see my girlfriend for a 3-day weekend to celebrate her graduation, but for most of the trip, I didn't feel like I actually had a girlfriend. I tried to give her plenty of leeway and space since she was spending time with friends and family, but on the final day, she barely seemed to want to talk to me or be around me. She didn't want to eat anything in the morning until I made myself breakfast. Then, suddenly, she was hungry. We ended up watching some television in her apartment because she didn't feel like going anywhere. But when her friend called and asked if she wanted to go to a bar, she immediately perked up, changed into a dress, and got ready to leave. While on the phone, within earshot, she said, "Oh, we just need to drop off my boyfriend at the airport, then we can go have some fun." Her friend was very rude and even racist, talking as if I weren't even there, and she took her time driving to the airport, only getting me there about half an hour before my flight was supposed to take off. I grabbed my bags and had to run to the terminal to make it on time. Somewhere on that flight home, I realized I hadn't even kissed my girlfriend goodbye. That was pretty much the moment I knew the relationship wasn't working. Looking back, I think she liked having a boyfriend, so she wouldn't have to be alone when she felt lonely, and she only spent time with me when it was convenient for her. It was completely one-sided and unhealthy. I tried to see her one more time when I was in town for other business, but she said she was too busy to hang out. So I ended things and haven't spoken to her since. Story 3. It was actually in the middle of a breakup, but I was still in shock and trying to figure out if it was really happening. We had spent the night arguing, going in circles without getting anywhere. Our problems came from some pretty fundamental differences in lifestyle that had only become clear later in the relationship. Even though we tried to adapt, it just made us both miserable. We were still living in the same apartment, but eventually we gave up and went into separate rooms. The last thing she said to me was, "Please, don't hurt the cats." It completely caught me off guard. Why would I ever do that? I loved our pets. I've never been violent in my life. The thought that she might see me as someone capable of that shook me. It made me question how she really saw me all along. Either she had never really known me for the past 2 years, or, more likely, she had turned me into someone different in her mind, someone I wasn't. Maybe it was her way of making things easier for herself, Either possibility scared me. Up until that point, I had still been thinking about trying to fix things or at least staying friends. But that one strange, ridiculous moment made me finally see what was happening. I had been putting so much effort into the woman I loved, but the woman I loved was gone. She had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone who had been dating a version of me I had never met. To everybody that relates to this, it's just as easy to vilify somebody as it is to vilify them back for feeling they did it to you. Try hard to remember the positives because it's sometimes human nature to fixate on the negatives to feel justified in your feelings. Story 4. I was seeing someone I loved deeply for almost 4 years. Sharing your love and your life with someone should add to it, not take away from it. But when everything in my life started to suffer because of the relationship, I knew it had to end. My work was slipping. My management team told me my performance was dropping. My friends barely spoke to me anymore, and I was constantly arguing with my family because I was always in a bad mood. At the time, it felt impossible to live without her, but it was just as impossible to live with her in my life. No matter how much it hurt, I had to let go. Now, I've been in a relationship for 3 years with someone I truly hope wants to spend the rest of her life with me. My ex from that time is happy too, living her own life in another country. Follow your heart. But when your heart starts to wreck everything else in your life, it's time to follow your brain. Story 5. It was exactly 2 years ago, August of 2012. She had just given birth to our second child that June. We had agreed it would be best for her to stay home and take care of the kids for a while I continued working full-time. One afternoon, I came home from work and found my older daughter napping in her room. That wasn't unusual. She was 4 at the time and still took naps occasionally. Then I heard the baby crying from our bedroom. When I walked in, the shades were drawn, my partner was asleep, and the baby was in her bassinet. It was obvious she had been crying for quite a while, at least an hour, maybe more. Her face was beet red, and she had soiled herself completely. She was a mess, screaming at the top of her lungs while her mother slept through it all like a rock. I took the baby into another room, cleaned her up, calmed her down, and fed her. Her clothes were so soiled, I had to throw them away. When I opened the garbage can, I saw the empty vodka bottle, but it didn't surprise me. Her mother was drinking again. The next few weeks were chaos. Eventually, I had to call the police to remove her from the home, and I took custody of our children. We had been through this before. The drinking, the drugs, the cheating, rehab, cleaning up, trying again. It was exhausting. I couldn't keep doing it. Our children deserved better. They deserved to be safe. Story 6. I was with my ex-boyfriend for 4 years. I helped him through so much and was his shoulder to lean on, his rock through everything. In return, he spent those same years slowly breaking me down. He told me he was self-conscious because I didn't look like the kind of girl he thought he'd be with. I was naive. I stayed with him even after he cheated on me a couple of times and tried to cheat countless other times. There was constant emotional cheating while he was away at school, and I was back home working my ass off to save money for an apartment for us. The last time I found out he was trying to talk to another girl, I told him I couldn't do it anymore. I remember sitting in my car, forcing him to have the breakup conversation and him telling me I was so cold. Well, that's what years of loving someone who's only capable of loving themselves will do to you. I'm better off today, even if it still hurts sometimes. And Jeff, if you ever see this, screw you for wasting my time and filling my head with empty promises. Story 7. 4 years into the relationship, and he still hadn't figured out whether he wanted to marry me. He was a great guy. We really enjoyed each other's company. Our families got along wonderfully. But ultimately, we were on different paths. I wanted to settle down, and he didn't know what he wanted. I figured that if he didn't know after 4 years whether I was the one, then I wasn't. We ended things amicably and even kept hanging out for a while because we genuinely liked spending time together. 6 months later, I met someone else. We clicked instantly, and within 2 weeks, we both knew. This was it. And it was. We've now been married for 8 years and have 2 beautiful children together. My ex never really settled down, though he's dated a few women since. When I got engaged, he asked if he had blown his chance. I told him, nah, I wasn't the one. You would have known if I were. I meant it. I genuinely hope he's happy. I know he wouldn't have been if we'd stayed together. I can't blame him for not wanting what I wanted. I'm not the easiest person to live with. It's a big commitment. I think that's when you know it's time to walk away. When you realize you want different things, and no matter how much you care about each other, you'll never be truly fulfilled by staying. Story 8. I was in a relationship for 2 years. He constantly made me feel insecure and called me stupid all the time. It was mental and emotional abuse. Every few months, he would break up with me, and even then, we'd still hang out and sleep together because I loved him and just wanted to be around him. He would text other girls he was trying to sleep with, right in front of me, while sitting in my own house. I would beg him to stop, but he never did. The moment I realized it was truly time to end it for good came after a small fight about Facebook. I broke up with him, and suddenly, he started acting like the perfect boyfriend. Sweet, attentive, saying all the right things. But deep down, I knew that the moment I took him back, it would all stop, and we'd fall right back into the same cycle. It was the hardest thing I've ever done because, for once, he was showing me that he cared, that he loved me, and I had to force myself to walk away anyway. I still remember him begging me to explain why I didn't want him even though he was finally being better. It was one of the first times I'd ever seen him cry. Story 9. Last month, the paramedics had to be called because my boyfriend, 21, of 5.5 years, took too much, or too frequently, of a PCP analog. He didn't have to go to the hospital but had a good talk with the paramedics that his mom and I hoped might wake him up. Over the past month, I've been struggling with whether or not to end this. I keep thinking about how I'd have to be the one calling paramedics, cleaning up his messes, and whether I really want to raise children with him. Since then, I've been a bit distant, while he's been extremely affectionate, constantly saying things like, "I want to marry you and be with you forever." It's been a really hard, stressful month for me, wondering whether I was just in a slump or simply not that into him anymore. I've been being intimate with him without wanting it myself, and he still wants more. I've hated him touching me or admiring my body. It just makes me upset. After a small conversation where I didn't bring up my fears, I decided to give him another chance to see if it was a slump I could work through. He had said I could talk to him about anything, so I thought that if things got worse, I might find the courage to have that conversation. Well, Saturday morning at 4 a.m., less than 24 hours after I'd seen him, and 36 hours after deciding to give him a second chance, his mother called to tell me he was in the hospital, unconscious, and they didn't know if he would make it out. He has since regained consciousness and is now in seclusion on the psychiatric ward under 24-hour watch. Since that call, I've slowly begun breaking up with him in my mind, sorting through my thoughts so we can have a proper conversation when he gets out. It's going to be hard, but I don't plan to end things until he's out of the hospital. I just don't think he needs more piled on right now. Still, I can't help wondering if it might be better to do it while he has access to the psychiatrist. I'd really appreciate some advice on that. I care about him very much, and I truly want him to be happy. But by staying, all I'm doing is enabling this behavior while he keeps making these reckless choices. I know the timing is awful, and I can't help but feel like I should have ended things before this happened. Now, it feels like I'm abandoning him. Still, at 21, I shouldn't have to worry about my healthy boyfriend dying in the hospital. I don't want to be the one making calls the next time he overdoses or worse. I don't need that kind of chaos in my life. I'm going to tell him that we both have some growing up to do, and that maybe someday we can reconnect. But I can't stay while he's hurting his family and me like this. Eat it. I've also been beating myself up, wondering if he'd still be in the hospital if I had voiced my fears about the drug use or ended things sooner. I'll be breaking up with him as soon as I'm able to see him. Story 10. We were together for 4 years before things suddenly got difficult for no clear reason. We tried for another 2 years, but it just kept getting harder. Everything I did seemed wrong. I felt judged every moment. Any time I had to spend apart for work or with friends felt like the end of our relationship. Small problems never had solutions, only her feelings about them, which quickly turned into near deal breakers. There were so many breaking points, yet she always wanted to stay together. At one point, a coworker started hitting on her in really inappropriate ways, trying to send inappropriate texts, trying to kiss her, even talking about intimacy with her at work. Since she was his boss and we were together, I kept telling her I wasn't okay with it and that I was going to confront him. She begged me not to and promised she'd stop talking to him. Instead, she tried to stay just friends. He was a complete jerk, but somehow I ended up feeling like the castrated boyfriend in her new dynamic with him. She started using me to make him jealous, and the only times we seemed to connect were when he was within earshot. We eventually went to couples counseling, her idea, where I found out she'd been emotionally cheating on me. The thing is, our problems were very fixable, but instead of working on them, she just wanted to make sure I was doing okay during these tough times. Odd. She started struggling with her mental health and said she needed space to be single and figure her life out. She mentioned that we could still hook up if we were polyamorous, which felt strange, but insisted she needed time on her own. I fought for us until the very end, but eventually I let go for her well-being. It was incredibly painful, but that's when I realized it was time to give up on the relationship. I wanted her to grow into a better version of herself, and if that meant doing it without me, I was willing to let go of the most important person in my life, for her. Cut to a few months later, she tells me that she fell out of love with me and had known it for over 2 years back when she stopped even trying in our relationship. She's now dating that same coworker and jumped straight into the relationship as soon as she moved out. I had organized and paid for counseling because I thought she wanted to work on us, but it turns out she just wanted a smoother way to let me down. She told me it was easier for her to start dating again because she'd been over it a lot longer than I have. Then she actually thanked me for being so supportive while she and her coworker figured out their relationship and for putting up with her nonsense for 2 years. She said she only left when she finally had, as she called it, an out. When I realized she'd been trying to string me along after the breakup, keeping me around as emotional support while sleeping with him, I cut her out of my life completely. That was the moment I truly let go of our relationship. I've learned a lot from all of this, and I'm working hard to make sure I never treat anyone the way I was treated. As angry and deeply hurt as I still am, almost a year later, I know that no one else deserves to go through what I did. Story 11. There was never an exact moment when I knew. It was a feeling that started deep in my gut and slowly crept upward until I felt sick because the person I'd loved with all my heart suddenly didn't look the same to me anymore. It was the most stressful time of my life, and the one person I'd always counted on to calm me down, keep me grounded, and remind me what really mattered had become the very source of all my stress. This person, my best friend of 5 years, the one I went to with every problem, big or small, the one I texted whenever I saw something funny or ridiculous, the one I called at 3 in the morning because I couldn't sleep, had suddenly become the person I wasn't talking to. It wasn't a lack of effort or disinterest. It was an unexpected but enormous disconnect. All this doubt, coming directly from that person, began to take over. I became unsure of everything, what I felt, why I felt it, and started questioning every little thing. That small seed of uncertainty grew until it made every good thing I'd fought so hard to save feel completely futile. I wasn't happy anymore. Not with myself, not with him, not with us. I wish I could still love him the way I once did, the way he loved me. I wanted to give him everything, to make him the happiest man alive, but I couldn't do it. And in trying, I wore myself out. It all just fell apart without my ever meaning it to. It broke my heart as much as it broke his. I don't know if this really answers the question, but I needed to get this out. Thanks, OP. Story 12. We had just been in a head-on collision and both cars were totaled. He was thankfully okay. Not banged up, acting completely normal. Just trying not to lose it at the other driver. I wasn't so lucky. I was pretty beat up. No broken bones, but some nasty contusions and sprains from the impact. The seatbelts had left bruises, and the engine had broken off its mounts, pushing the dashboard into my knee. Ouch. I couldn't open my door because it was bent and my shoulder was sprained. A passerby, thankfully, managed to pry it open and asked with genuine concern if I was okay. I said, "I think so," and slowly climbed out of the wreck. That's when all the pain started to hit me. I hobbled over to the sidewalk and leaned against a building, hunched over because I couldn't stand up straight. It felt like a football player was sitting on my chest. My boyfriend looked at me and asked, "Why are you breathing like that?" Not with concern, but like I was being dramatic or doing it for attention. I managed to say something like, "I don't know, maybe because of that," and pointed toward the two cars still crumpled together in the middle of the road. When the paramedics arrived, I decided to go to the hospital. That was a big decision for me, especially since I didn't have health insurance. I climbed into the back of the ambulance and they started asking questions. "What's your name? How long have you been breathing like that? Where does it hurt? Who's the president?" And so on. My boyfriend climbed into the back of the ambulance, gave me a half smile and asked, "Are you okay?" I said, "I don't know." He stayed with me while the paramedics fitted a neck brace and strapped me to a backboard. I'm a little claustrophobic, and between that and the pain, the whole thing was incredibly uncomfortable. I just tried to stay calm, breathe, focus, and stay present. We were about to head to the hospital when I saw a wave of concern cross his face. For a second, I thought the shock had finally worn off and reality had hit him. Then he jumped up and said, "I've got to make sure my stereo's okay. Where are they taking my car? I have to get my speaker out of the back." And before I could respond, he bolted out of the ambulance. After a few steps, he turned back and asked, "You're gonna be okay, right?" "I don't know," I replied. "Well, do you want me to meet you at the hospital?" "That would be nice, yes." "What?" "That would be nice, yes," I repeated, straining to speak. He sighed. "Okay, love you." In that moment, I felt a strange clarity, like I could see the entire exchange from the outside, detached. I thought, he really does love me, just not as much as he loves his stereo. Let's see how this all plays out. Jump ahead. When he finally arrived at the hospital, he did seem concerned at first. "How are you feeling? I bet they gave you some good stuff for the pain, huh? Got any more of it?" Haha. "No." "Really?" As I waited for the results from my x-rays and tests, his patience quickly disappeared. "Did they tell you how long this is going to take? Why are you still breathing like that? Seriously, how long is this going to be? I have to work in the morning, Did they say what's wrong with you? God, why did I even come here? I had to wait like 20 minutes for a cab just to get here, and it cost me almost $20, and I have to open in the morning." I replied with the complete clarity and calmness that only shock and morphine can bring. "Well, I took an ambulance here. I didn't have to wait long, but it's probably going to cost me about $800. I don't know how long all of this will take, so if you need to leave, then you should go." "What did I even come here for?" he snapped. "I'm not sure," I said evenly. "I know why I'm here. But if all you're going to do right now is complain, then I'd rather just see you another time." I felt like a frigging Zen master. In that moment, everything became completely clear. After 5 years with this person, it was over. This was not the man I wanted by my side in a moment of need. Story 13. When I came home, I found her drunk beyond all comprehension. She grabbed a knife, came at me, and then started hitting herself with a belt, shouting that she was going to tell the police I was beating her so I'd be arrested. Then she began cutting herself with the knife, and I ran outside to call the police. When they arrived, they had to tackle her and place her on a psychological hold for 48 hours until she sobered up. Her blood alcohol content was reportedly 0.4, given that the legal limit for intoxication is 0.008. After that incident, I tried to help her. I offered to go to AA meetings with her and even contacted her parents, asking them to come stay with her while I was at work to help prevent another binge. They refused. I went to work anyway, and when I came home, her car was parked in the front yard. She had downed almost a gallon of vodka that day alone. I called an ambulance. She was barely breathing. They managed to revive her and placed her back on psychiatric hold. I nearly lost my job trying to juggle caring for her and keeping everything else together. She eventually went to stay with a family member for a few weeks to sober up. When she came back, she lasted 24 hours before doing it again, this time threatening to hurt herself. I called her parents, and they blamed me, saying she was living in sin by living with me and that her behavior was somehow my fault. That was the breaking point. I called my dad, told him to bring his truck and my brother's, threw my things into trash bags, told her to F off, and never saw her again. 2 months later, I met the woman who would become my wife. The best thing that's ever happened to me. Story 14. When I realized I was just an emotional punching bag. Whenever anything happened to my girlfriend, she came to me. If a family member died or hurt her in some way, I was there for her to vent. If something terrible happened at work, I was the shoulder she cried on. When someone at school, back when we were seniors in high school, treated her so horribly that she started talking about ending her life, I was the one who drove to her house to talk her down. I did everything I could to make her happy. I took her out to nice places, bought her things, and spent as much time with her as I could, especially when she was feeling low. My whole existence revolved around keeping her happy. I know that's what a relationship is supposed to be about, being there for each other. But I was putting in far more effort than she ever did. When I was broken down to the point where nothing could make me happy but a bullet to the head, she brushed me off. When she needed to vent about her day, I was all ears, trying to help however I could. But if I even started talking about my day, she'd stare off into space and tune me out. She never did anything for me, never tried to offer any real support. I had a best friend named Ty. We were really close, always talking, always hanging out. Eventually, he became the first person I'd reach out to when I needed someone to talk to. He knew how my girlfriend acted and often told me I deserved better. If my car broke down in the middle of the night, my girlfriend would just say, "Call a tow truck or something, I'm trying to sleep." But if I called Ty, he'd ask where I was and say, "I'm on my way." One morning, I woke up to a flood of messages and missed calls. Ty had died the night before. A drunk driver hit him while he was walking home from the corner store. I was completely shattered. My closest friend since high school was gone. Suddenly, I didn't have a support system. I didn't have anyone to go to. I spent the entire day in my room either sobbing or lying motionless in bed. I was a gamer with a girlfriend who'd rather spend the day talking on the phone than actually hang out with me, so I was used to going hours without anyone checking in. Around 7 that evening, my girlfriend finally came into our room and spoke to me for the first time that day. "Why haven't you been out of bed all day?" she asked. "Ty died last night. He was hit by a drunk driver." She walked into our closet and started rummaging around. A minute later, she came out, pulling a shirt over her head. "I can't believe what happened at work today." Aaron came up to me and was like, I snapped. "Seriously? My best friend just died and you can't even ask how I'm doing? Can you think about someone else's well-being for 5 minutes? Whatever. I'm going out with a few friends tonight. I can't deal with you right now." "Fine. Don't worry about coming back. We're through." Whatever. She left for the night and came back the next morning. Apparently, she thought I hadn't been serious. The boxes of her things stacked by the door proved otherwise. We argued a little. She loaded her stuff into her SUV. She didn't have much, since I'd paid for nearly everything. And then she left. When I finally left the house of my own accord to see my friends, I found out she was already with someone else. It had only been 2 weeks since we broke up, and she was already dating again. I spent months trying to cope with my losses and didn't date anyone for 3 years. Thankfully, I had a good group of friends who came to my aid. They might not have been as motivating or grounding as Ty, but they came pretty close. I don't want to know what she was doing on all those nights she went out. She was a completely different person by the end of our relationship. At first, she was just a little selfish, but after a year or two, she became entirely self-centered. Honestly, I don't even want to know anymore. Story 15. When she started sleeping with her ex-husband a few weeks ago, something in me finally broke. 6 years of my life, gone. I supported her financially while I was in the military. I paid for the house, the bills, bought her a nice car, all so she could focus on school and get her degree. When I got out, I wanted to go to school full-time, but no. I had to keep a full-time job and be a full-time student. It didn't work. And because I couldn't handle 50-plus hours a week at a factory on top of classes, she decided to sleep with her ex-husband and somehow blamed me for it. Now, here I am, broke as hell, still living in the same house with her while she spends all day with him. Screw you. I gave up my career for you. I was 12 years away from retirement. I supported you financially and emotionally. I put you through school. I treated you the way a woman should be treated. And you'd rather be with that drugged-up, jobless, abusive piece of trash? It blows my mind. I guess you two deserve each other. You broke me. I don't even know what to do anymore. Story 16. We'd been together for the better part of a year. I'd even adjusted my class schedule so I'd have a few hours in the middle of the day to talk with her. At that point, I had a 2.5-hour commute to and from university, so those midday hours meant I wasn't getting home until around 11 at night. It just made more sense to stay on campus and get my work done there. I explained that to her, told her that if I wasn't texting, calling, or responding during those hours, it was probably because I was in the library trying to get work done. For about a month, things were fine, but then she started getting bitter about how inconsistent I'd become with the time I'd once dedicated to her. At the time, I thought that was a fair compromise, considering how much of my schedule was already committed to school, but there wasn't much more I could do. In the second month of that schedule, I got an opportunity to work for a dating site startup. My job was simple: walk around downtown San Francisco during lunch hours and hand out roses to women as part of their promotion. It was only for 2 weeks, and it fit neatly into the middle of my free time. I didn't have any big projects coming up, so I figured why not? Easy cash I could spend on her. I made the mistake of keeping it a secret. For just 2 weeks, out of the 8 or 9 months we'd been together, I suddenly became the neglectful boyfriend. Every single time I hadn't been perfectly attentive in the past, or hadn't warned her ahead of time when I'd be busy or out of town, was dragged up and thrown at me. I'd already bought the ring before any of the fighting started, so I just gave it to her then. Before, I somehow found the clinginess endearing, maybe even flattering. I was blind to how bad it had gotten for far too long. I had to stop and actually think about it. I was spending 5 hours a day on trains and buses, another 5 in classes, and what little time I wasn't doing either had to be spent doing something important or sleeping, unless I was talking to her. I had basically zero time to just unwind and let my brain shut off while How It's Made played on Netflix. So I decided to tell her I needed space. Oh, that was a mistake. I thought you loved me. Okay, let's try that again. I need some time to myself. What about me? Crap. I need time to relax. So I stress you out? Well, yes. I want to unwind at the end of the day, not review every tiny moment I wasn't immediately reachable. Why did you even buy me the ring? Because I thought I was wrong before, but not now. No, I'm done. Goodbye. And that was it. Cold turkey. 4 months of texts, emails, voicemails, Facebook messages, all hours of the day. And I didn't respond once. I still felt like the bad guy, especially after she started sending messages like, "I'm horny, just come make love to me, I won't even talk." When I didn't respond, it turned into, "I need you. I'm so sorry. I'll try to be better." Over and over. For 4 months. Eventually, I snapped. I got a new phone number, blocked every other way she could reach me, and finally moved on. Story 17. The last girl I dated was great in bed, had a good head on her shoulders, and aside from a few bad social and financial decisions that mostly came from family drama, she seemed solid. We were both dirt poor, but thanks to her persistence and relentless job searching, we eventually got back on our feet. Everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. Honestly, it felt like there was a real chance for something long-term. And then she landed a great job. It paid exceptionally well. Better than anything either of us had seen in ages. It completely turned our financial situation around. Debts were paid off, credit cards closed, our credit rebuilt. For the first time in a long time, we were doing great financially. Except then, she started to change. She stopped helping around the house and began spending more and more time with her friends. Friends who, I later found out, were supplying her with whatever drugs she could get her hands on. She started talking about cute guys who flirted with her, and even went so far as to make profiles on dating sites looking for new friends. The only thing that didn't change was the physical intimacy. If anything, she wanted it more, which at the time I didn't really mind. And then the Fire Nation attacked. As our financial stability grew, so did her appetite for luxury. She got us both new phones, bought herself a new car, and kept splurging on gadgets, e-readers, iPads, new gaming consoles, which was funny since she hated gaming, a new TV, and clothes. So many clothes. So I suggested getting something for myself. I don't even remember what it was now, but I'll never forget her reaction. I work my sweats off to keep us afloat, and you want to go ahead and spend my money? To be fair, I was only making about a third of what she earned each month. But still, I had a solid job. If it came down to it, I could have supported myself. It didn't matter though. Once that argument happened, everything became an issue. She was no longer happy with anything. She didn't want to spend time with me unless it was for physical intimacy, which was honestly kind of weird, and when she did spend time with me, nothing ever pleased her. This movie sucks. Let's watch something else. Nope, this one sucks too. Let's go out and do something. We'd drive half an hour to a place, spend maybe 10 minutes there, and then she'd say, let's go somewhere else. This place sucks. She was like a cat that couldn't decide whether it wanted to be inside or outside. Nothing was ever enough. Everything was unsatisfactory. Then came the little comments about how she wanted to travel, but without me. She said she wanted to take some time off and visit exotic places, maybe spend 3 or 4 months abroad. When I asked if she'd miss me, she said she would, but added that she'd find some local sausage to keep her satisfied until she got back. When I questioned that, she got upset that I thought physical commitment was important. According to her, she shouldn't have to be tied down intimacy-wise just because I'd be several thousand miles away. In the end, I finally snapped and told her I wasn't happy anymore. That's when she dropped the bombshell that she hadn't been happy either, and that she'd already been taking steps to make sure things would go smoothly. What that actually meant was that she'd met someone else and was becoming emotionally involved with him. And when she officially got together with this guy, she tried to pawn his girlfriend off on me as some kind of consolation prize. Story 18. When the red flags of a manipulative and potentially abusive relationship started showing up, I broke things off before we were even officially dating. It began when he got jealous that I went to grab lunch with a male coworker. Then he got angry about me texting other men. Later, he even threatened to lie to another guy I dated to ruin a potential relationship, just so he could keep me for himself. When I told him I didn't want to be in an exclusive relationship for a while and wanted to keep things casual, I encouraged him to do the same, but he said he was already in love with me. The final straw came when his roommate told me he'd thrown a fit, slamming doors and shouting, because I'd had a simple conversation with my ex, someone I had absolutely no intention of rekindling anything with. Another red flag came when he tried to explain his jealousy problem. He said it was because he was the oldest child, so he got less attention growing up, but then added that his mom actually loved him more than his younger siblings, and he just hated not getting that same level of attention from everyone else. And then there was the pizza night at my place. He left his phone next to me on the couch, right in the middle of a texting conversation with another girl, his coworker. This was the same coworker he claimed to have broken things off with for me, supposedly to guilt me into an exclusive relationship. The screen lit up with her reply, "I can't wait." It was in response to his message about doing wild things at work tomorrow on their breaks. Oh, and then there was the way he tied money to love, like love automatically meant debt. I'd mentioned losing my $20 sunglasses, and suddenly I'd be getting a $350 pair of Maui gyms. Then it was 3 bras and 5 pairs of panties from Victoria's Secret, plus him offering to pick up a third job so I could quit mine and move in with him. All, of course, because it would make me happy. Right. Not because it would give him control over who I interacted with or make me feel pressured to stay because he was supporting me. No, nothing like that. And just to top it off, that same weekend he was in Vegas with his friends. He offered to fly me out for a single night, buy me a $400 ticket to EDC, a multi-day rave, then fly me back again the next day so I could make it to work on Sunday. Oh, and then there was his extreme addiction. He watched porn endless amounts of time and spent 3 to 5 times a day by himself, and had already slept with about 85 women before I came into his life last summer. By now, he's probably added another 5 to 10 to that list. If you couldn't keep up with his libido, he'd get angry or suspicious. He also talked about wanting to get me pregnant, something I suspect was less about love and more about leverage to keep me tied to him. Eventually, I started seeing someone else, because from the beginning, I'd made it clear that I wanted an open, non-committed relationship so I could date other people and feel free. The first night I let this other guy stay over was strange. It seemed like the one I'm talking about in this story ignored my request not to drive 45 minutes to spend the night with me again, for what would have been the 8th time in 2 weeks. The new guy I was considering dating had just gone through a brutal fight with his ex-wife. She'd threatened to break his wrists and was pounding on his door, screaming loud enough to wake up the whole neighborhood, so I told him to come over to cool off. He came over after taking a shower to calm his nerves and needed someone to talk to. So, there I was, listening to this guy vent about his crazy ex, when the jealous one started trying to invite himself over to my place, 45 minutes away, on a weeknight, even though he had to be up for work in 5 hours. I told him I was busy, tired, and not feeling well, because obviously if I'd just told him I had another guy over, it would have caused a crap ton of drama, even though nothing was happening, and I wasn't sure if the new guy would stay or leave after we talked. I knew it wasn't worth the explosion, but he kept pushing, spending nearly an hour trying to sweet-talk his way into my plans for the night, while I kept saying no. "Just leave the door unlocked and I'll let myself in," he texted. "You can go to bed now, and I'll join you after my shift." I think he suspected someone was over. Honestly, I think he drove down to my apartment just to look through my windows and see if anyone was with me. He'd admitted before that he'd done this kind of thing to his ex, and slashed her tires before we ever started dating. So, yeah, major red flag. That night, my doors stayed locked. But the next morning, he claimed he'd snuck in, slept next to me, and snuck out again without waking me up, because apparently he was a ninja now. I knew he was trying to sound cute or romantic about how much he wanted to be near me, but honestly, it was friggin' creepy. He also had a serious drinking problem. Mix one of those red flags with alcohol, add the fact that he used to be a linebacker in high school and had packed on a lot of weight since then, and you've got a recipe for me ending up in the hospital. Nope. Not going to let that happen. Not even once. I don't care how much he claimed to love me, how much he wanted to spend on me, or how badly he said he wanted to provide for me. It wasn't worth the risk. Story 19. When you've legitimately done everything you can in a long-term on and off relationship, and she tells you she just can't handle how serious things are getting, it hits hard. This girl and I dated sporadically for about 7 years. We first got together back in 8th grade. We were each other's first kiss, first significant other, first everything. But like so many young relationships, it didn't last. We tried to rekindle things a couple of times in high school, and for a while, it actually worked. But eventually, it fell apart again. Years later, after moving away and then returning, we reconnected. This time, as friends. We rebuilt our bond from the ground up, and over time, the connection deepened. Eventually, I decided to try again. And for a while, it felt like the best version of us yet. We still had the same physical chemistry, but now there was emotional maturity and a stronger friendship underneath it, making it feel real this time. Eventually, it didn't work out. She was struggling with some mental health issues, bipolar tendencies, while I was dealing with my own depression. Maybe that's why we were drawn to each other in the first place. But over time, my presence started bringing up painful memories from her past, and things fell apart again. Fast forward a year, and we tried once more. By that point, I understood the full picture. I dumped her, she dumped me. We'd both lifted each other to incredible highs and dragged each other through some deep lows. I knew exactly what I'd lost the last time, and I was determined not to make that mistake again. We were together for about 7 months, but toward the end, I could feel it turning bad again. All told, we'd dated for about 2.5 years out of the 7 that had passed since we were 13, but never for more than 3 months at a time. I genuinely loved her, both as a person and a partner, and I was completely open to the idea of a long-term relationship. But the truth was, we just didn't mesh that way. She got on my nerves sometimes, sure, but I figured that was just what happens when 2 different people spend a lot of time together. Then she started to pull away. Honestly, I was fine with that. She'd been getting on my nerves a bit anyway, so cutting it back to hanging out 3 or 4 times a week actually sounded like a relief. Then she started telling me she couldn't do it anymore. She said she loved me, but wasn't ready for such a serious relationship at 21. And honestly, that made sense. I wasn't entirely ready either, but I loved her, and I wasn't willing to let go of someone I genuinely enjoyed being with, just because of a fear of intimacy. I tried to hold on, but she kept pulling back. Still, she was too emotionally invested to walk away completely. A couple of weeks later, she asked to hang out as friends. I went, but I couldn't be my usual self. The visit was cold, awkward, even, until she kissed me goodnight. Just like that, we were back together for another month. But by the end of that, the same issue resurfaced. She still couldn't handle the depth of what we had, and we split again. This time, I was done. I loved her, and I still do, even 8 months later. But I'm not going to force anyone to be with me. A lot of people, girls especially in my experience, have trouble being direct. Saying, "I don't want to be with you," feels confrontational and awkward, so instead, they soften it with lines like, "I love you too much and it's confusing," or "I'm just not ready for a relationship like this." I'm not saying those reasons are always untrue, but after hearing them a few times, I've realized they often translate to, "We had our time. I'm not happy anymore, and it's over." Whatever the wording, even through nostalgia and deep emotional bonds, if someone keeps pulling back or showing that it's not working, that's the signal. It's time to say goodbye. Story 20. It reached the point where the bad started to outweigh the good. That was a hard truth to face because I loved him so deeply. I think part of me still does. I met him during a year abroad, and we started dating not long before I had to return home. We both believed the distance wouldn't be a problem, that we were strong enough to make it work. But once I moved back, something shifted for him. He began saying things like how there were better guys out there for me, that I wasn't funny enough, or that he would find someone better for me. Though he also insisted he wasn't good enough himself. It got to the point where I'd wake up every day, not knowing if he was going to break up with me again, as he often did, only to call moments later and apologize. He was young, and I kept using that as an excuse for his uncertainty, his immaturity, and the way he made me feel like I was never quite enough. But one day, after he decided not to speak to me for 4 days, he called and told me he didn't want to be with me anymore. He said I should stop planning to go back to his country to be with him. He told me he grew up in a big city and I was just a small-town kid, that he had money and I didn't, that we simply didn't click. As with every other time before, he begged me to forget what he'd said and come back to him the next day. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, truly, but I said no. It wasn't worth it. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I miss him terribly and think about him every day. We've lost contact. He went berserk and blocked me on everything, accusing me of taking advantage of him, saying he wasn't attracted to me, that I was fat, I'm actually very thin, and so on. It's so clear that he wasn't and isn't right for me. And yet I can't forget him. I can't get over him. There was just something about him that pulled me in completely. Having him beside me, holding his hand on the subway, wandering around the city being silly, planning our next hangout. He was like a magnet. I was consumed by his charm, his personality, his playfulness, and I miss him so much. Story 21. When you quit your job to be with her in New York City on a spur-of-the-moment trip, only to end up arguing most of the time about such trivial things. When you have to beg just to be intimate. When you realize you don't have as much in common as you once thought, and that the only way either of you could be happy is to break up. When you realize that dating someone 5.5 years younger isn't always the best idea. When you start moving way too fast. God, I could go on. I just don't know how I'm going to bring myself to end it. For context, she's 19, I'm 24. She knows it's coming. She sent me a text begging me not to leave her. I just told her I needed some space, to breathe, to figure out how this is all going to go down. The truth is, we have different values in life, different ideas of what a relationship should be. She sees it one way, and I see it another. The sad part is that she's my first girlfriend in 5 years. The last time I dated someone, I was still in high school. I was single and celibate for 5 years, only to start dating someone who doesn't like intimacy and doesn't care for it at all. I'm not saying that is the most important thing in a relationship, but when you go a month without it, knowing you've been intimate before, it takes a toll. It makes you question things. I want to feel wanted. We talked, and she said she would never initiate it, which means that every time I bring it up, it'll only upset her. And then there's the moment you realize you're not on the same level of maturity. That's a real problem, because you can't help but scoff, even just internally, at some of the things she says or does. It's when something as small as me breathing the wrong way, or ordering a burger instead of a steak on a date at a nice restaurant. Hard Rock Cafe, not that nice really, sets her off. She gets upset and moody, and you start to realize you can't keep ignoring it. Something has to change. When I talk to her, whether it's tomorrow or next week, once I've cleared my head, I don't even know what I'm going to say. No matter what I do, she won't agree with 90% of what I'm saying anyway. I just wish there were some way she could hear herself when her mood swings so badly, when she gets upset and snaps at me over the smallest things. Sometimes it's an accident, something I didn't even realize I did, or nothing at all. She doesn't understand how much it breaks my heart to see her unhappy for hours afterward. Lately, I've been trying to ignore it and just keep a smile on my face. But when I try to make her laugh or say, "Oh, look at this," and her response is, "Whatever, yeah," or that's my breaking point. I even asked her, please, to stop saying whatever, it's fine, because every time she does, it's in that heavy, clearly it's not fine tone. Then we end up arguing for an hour. And when I finally give up, she suddenly decides she's the one who's going to give up. I concede, and then she does a complete 180, throwing everything I just said right back at me. That's a real kick in the gut. When you notice she's letting you control her, then you have to step up and say, "This isn't healthy." Story 22, I had fallen victim to the sunk cost fallacy. My only long-term relationship lasted 7 years. We never married, and I can't honestly say there were many good times. In the end, I left because it had reached a point where one of us wouldn't have survived if I didn't. During that time, I sank into a dark place, so bitter and resentful that I found myself blaming her for everything, even for wasting what I thought were the best years of my life. I can see now how lost I was, how twisted that mindset had become. Looking back, I understand that she wasn't the one who wasted my time. I was. I stayed too long, hoping that being good, loyal, and patient would somehow make her reciprocate, that if I just kept trying to be a good person, she'd meet me halfway. But life doesn't work like that. Just because you give someone your best doesn't mean they'll ever give you theirs. This deserves a full story. I never really felt comfortable enough with people to put myself out there for a partner. Most of my friends would have described me as asexual. I always had it in my head that showing interest in someone would just make me look foolish. So, for a long time, I was a coward about it. It didn't help that I had a poor self-image. I grew up as the fat kid, quiet, introverted, always overthinking everything, always picking myself apart. Around the age of 16, I decided I needed to change. I got fit. I remember working out and thinking that one day I'd reach a point where women would actually want me. I even practiced flirting, online, and surprisingly, it started to work during the MySpace days. I went on a few dates with random girls I met there. None of them really went anywhere. I messed some of them up completely. Probably scared a few girls off while I was at it. Then I met the woman who would become my ex from this story. She seemed really normal. She had a steady job as a paralegal and was 6 years older than me. I was 19 at the time. But at the same time, she seemed a bit naive, maybe even more so than I was. At first, we were just friends. We went to clubs and events together. Then one night, we went to an event at a theme park and ended up on a ride that sat one person right behind the other. She leaned back against my chest for the whole ride, and something shifted. Later, when we were talking online, she suddenly blurted out that she liked me. Sounds romantic, right? I thought so too. The next day, she came over, and we were watching a movie when one thing led to another, and suddenly, I wasn't a virgin anymore. For the first time in my life, I felt like a normal human being. After that, we started seeing each other several times a week, but it didn't take long for what should have been huge red flags to start showing up. I was young and dumb, and for all the intelligence I thought I had, I somehow managed to become stupid when it came to her. Physical intimacy only really lasted about the first month. After that, she got lazy about it, only wanting me to please her and losing interest the moment she was satisfied. She was absolutely terrified of anyone she knew finding out that we were together. I was her dirty little secret, not because she was hiding me from someone else, but because she'd somehow decided I was beneath her. She didn't want her mother, whose opinion was the only one that mattered to her, to know about us. For more than a year, I was just a friend whenever we were out in public. About 2 months into the relationship came Halloween, our first holiday together. We went to a club that night somewhere far enough away that there was no chance of running into anyone who might tell her mother about us. But by then, she'd either never learned or had long since stopped showing me any respect. Even there, where we could have been ourselves, I was still treated like nobody. And to be clear, I wasn't confused about what we were. She was the one who defined us as being together. We left the club when she got a text from one of her friends who happened to be performing at a nearby place. The other club was 21 and over, and I was still 19. She told me she'd just go in to say hi and come right back out. It wouldn't take more than a few minutes. So there I was, standing outside in my costume, a ridiculous hospital gown with a fake bum, shivering in the cold for over an hour. Inside, she'd been talked into joining her friend's act. She was suspended in front of a crowd. And when she finally came out, she didn't seem to care at all. She just told me she was going to say goodbye to her friends and ran back inside. I ended up waiting another 20 minutes. By then, I was furious. I swear there must have been visible steam radiating off me. And that says a lot because I'm known for being calm, zen even. She's the only person who's ever managed to make me truly angry. That was the moment when whatever remained of my sanity screamed at me to end it. I didn't. She had some anxiety issues, one of them being that she wouldn't drive unless someone else was with her. Not long after that Halloween, she decided to go back to school. She basically told me that the only way she could keep seeing me was if I drove her there 3 times a week. She didn't want to feel trapped, so I had to wait around on campus until her classes were over. In other words, I was spending more time driving her to and from school than most people put into a part-time job. Normally, that might have been a nice way for a couple to spend time together, but by then, I was starting to feel worn down by her dependence on me. Eventually, I began to suspect that she was cheating on me with one of her classmates. There was plenty of circumstantial evidence, enough for most people to walk away. I confronted her, and she denied it. And because I was young and naive, I let her. I didn't have absolute proof, and as long as there was even the slightest chance I was wrong, I chose to believe her. Story 23. We'd been together for almost 3 years when one day she refused to hold my hand in public. When I reached for her, she slipped her hands into her pockets instead. Our relationship had already been rocky for a while, but for some reason, that moment was what broke something in me. I thought about it a lot afterward and realized that most of our relationship had been spent with her getting upset over something, and me spending hours trying to figure out what was wrong, trying to calm her down. She'd get upset over the smallest things, and at least 3 of the things she'd regularly bring up were things that had happened before we'd even met. Stories she'd heard from a mutual friend, whom she'd later admitted she'd pressured into telling her. Anyway, I realized I hadn't really cared about her in a long time. More than anything, I'd grown to resent her. She had just become another part of my life, something I'd gotten used to rather than something I wanted. That night, I decided it was time to end things. But before I could, she called me to break up with me. Honestly, it made things easier. A few days later, though, she called my mom and told her she didn't actually want to break up, that she'd only said it to try to make me care. I found that incredibly strange, especially since our relationship had felt completely one-sided for so long. Looking back now, I realize I hadn't truly enjoyed spending time with her for at least a year and a half before we broke up, and my behavior probably showed it. And the fact that she reached out to my mom when the two of them were never even close made it all the more bizarre. She tried to get back together with me a few times over the next 6 months. The last time came completely out of nowhere. I hadn't spoken to her in months when she suddenly texted me saying she was in a parking lot near my house and wasn't leaving until I came to talk to her, which of course I absolutely wasn't going to do. That was about 3 years ago. A few months back, we started texting again for no real reason. I thought it was harmless. Surely she'd moved on by now. Turns out I was wrong. She still hadn't gotten over me and hadn't dated anyone since we broke up. She even asked if there was any chance we could get back together. I told her, just as I'd said many times before, that I didn't have feelings for her anymore, and to be completely honest, never would again. I haven't heard from her since. Story 24. I realized it was time to give up when I developed an actual fear of being happy. I'd get small panic attacks whenever we had a romantic moment, because I knew that at any second someone she was cheating with could call her. I realized it was time to give up when I saw that she couldn't go more than one semester without being unfaithful. I always figured out who it was. She was so painfully obvious about it. I realized it was time to give up when I understood that she was only with me because she felt safe, not because she loved me. When I realized I was the one putting most of the effort into the relationship. When I realized she had a habit of comparing me to others, always unfavorably. When I realized that whenever I opened up about feeling depressed, her only response was, "Well, that sucks." When she started mocking me for the most trivial things. When she made me feel so small that I began to hate myself. When I couldn't even trust some of my friends because I knew that either they wanted to be with her or she wanted to be with them. When we broke up so she could grow, and she immediately hooked up with someone I knew. It felt like she had a waiting list of people lined up. I gave up on that relationship countless times, and somehow, I always came back. Even now, we're still in each other's lives. Don't know when I'll finally realize it's time to give up on her completely. Story 25. I found out when I snooped through her emails and saw that she'd been talking about me behind my back to her friends. I'd already broken up with her a year earlier, after discovering graphic messages with an ex, someone she'd told that we were on a break and was planning to visit that same weekend. I ended it immediately. The mistake I made was not taking the time afterward to be alone and get my life together. I was in a dark place, depressed, lost, and desperate for something familiar. A few months later, I took her back because I still loved her and wanted to believe we could fix what was broken. But I wasn't ready to be with anyone, let alone someone who had already shattered my trust. That mistrust made me do something I'll always regret. I invaded her privacy, and thinking about it now makes me feel sick. I hate that I became that person. Someone I never thought I could be. A few months after we got back together, I snooped through her emails again, searching for my name and her ex's, and found that she'd been complaining to a friend about me. She said I lacked motivation and wasn't working hard enough at a job I hated. To be fair, she wasn't wrong. But it still stung, because those were things she should have talked about with me, not behind my back. Reading that made me angry, and it made me start to question whether I really wanted to build a life with her. The strange thing was, when we were together, her demeanor was completely different. Loving, supportive, even happy. I think she felt she'd lost the right to complain after I'd taken her back following the situation with her ex, but I would have much preferred honesty. A difficult conversation over being slandered to her friends and having my flaws exaggerated. What I needed back then wasn't gossip. It was guidance. Maybe even a well-placed kick in the pants. That discovery also made me second-guess traveling with her to meet her family, something she'd really wanted us to do. But we eventually worked it out, and for a while, things were good again. Over time, though, those doubts and unresolved issues began to build up. The more problems I faced in my own life and career, the less I felt I could confide in her. I already knew she saw me as weak, and that's the opposite of how a good relationship should feel. Little by little, I stopped sharing my vulnerabilities with her. I grew defensive, hypersensitive to anything that even hinted at criticism. And in those moments of insecurity, I said things I shouldn't have. Hurtful, jealous things. Not often, maybe twice in the year after we got back together, but still. I said them. Those memories will always haunt me. Later, I snooped again and found messages where she told a friend that she was ashamed of me. They were even joking about setting her up with other guys. That friend had never liked me, mostly because of what my girlfriend had told her, and to be fair, she seemed pretty inconsiderate and selfish herself from what I'd heard. That was the moment I finally gave up. Around that same time, she wanted us to move in together. I'd originally been open to it, even though I had some concerns about having space to ourselves. We met at work and still worked together. But after reading those messages, I knew it would be a terrible idea. For a couple of months, we were fairly happy when we were physically together. But there was always a distance, an elephant in the room that neither of us dared to name. Part of me wishes I'd brought up what I'd found, confessed to snooping, and forced an honest conversation. Maybe if we'd done that, really laid everything bare, we might have had a chance to make it work. But we didn't. By then, I was completely drained, emotionally and mentally exhausted. When we finally decided to end things, it was one of the most confusing times in my life. I kept swinging between wanting her back and holding on to the decision to let go. When she told me she'd decided to move back to her home state where her family was, we both caved. We spent the next few months seeing each other again before her departure. I supported her decision completely. I was genuinely happy for her, even though it made me incredibly sad. Before she left, I gave her a small locket that she wore on a chain around her neck. I still have the tiny key to it, kept in a small box alongside a $20 bill she once hid under my keyboard to repay me for dinner on our first date. Money I never spent. When it came time for her to board the bus home, she asked me to come see her off. She said goodbye to her other friends separately, so we could be alone on the platform. She cried a lot. I told her I was proud of her, happy for her, and that she had so many good things ahead of her. We kissed over and over. I remember wiping away her tears and smearing her eyeliner. Then she got on the bus. A minute later, she texted me, "I could kiss you forever. I love you, Ryan." That was about a year ago. From what I can tell, things have gone well for her, and I think she knows that I'm genuinely happy for her. Happier than I usually am for most people. We still chat occasionally, and I think there's still a lot of love between us, even if it's different now. Over the past year, I've focused on rebuilding myself. I've trained in Muay Thai, gotten in shape, worked harder at my job, and finished my first online novel, a strange story about a virus that kills everyone on Earth except Reddit users. I've been figuring out what career path I want to pursue, dating casually, and getting the kind of experience I know I need before I can really settle down again. As painful as it all was, I wouldn't take any of it back. It shaped me into someone stronger, more loving, empathetic, focused, communicative, hardworking, and far less judgmental than I used to be. Story 26. I don't know when it happened, but at some point in our relationship, my boyfriend of 3.5 years just stopped seeing me as a person. It was like I became a supporting character in his own pitiful tragedy. I carried the weight of his moods, his unhappiness, his endless self-reflection. He'd talk about himself for hours, and eventually, I stopped talking about myself altogether. Whenever I tried, he'd interrupt to bring the focus back to him. Or I'd just grow too tired of explaining things he should already know. I know everything about him, but I doubt he could even tell you what I do for a living, despite the fact that I've explained it to him dozens of times. A couple of months ago, I spent an entire weekend helping him with a project. I even turned down other invitations just so I could be there for him. Then, that Monday, he wanted to go out to dinner, and his mood was horrible. I was furious. He was tired, stressed, whatever his excuse was, but after I'd given up my whole weekend to help him, he couldn't even be decent company for a single meal. I remember sitting in the car, seething, on the verge of telling him to pull over so I could walk out right then and there. My only regret from that relationship is that I didn't. About a month and a half later, we broke up. And of course, all he could do was talk about himself. It's been 3 weeks since the breakup, and I've pretty much cut him out of my life. Blocked on GChat, blocked on Facebook. I've even started distancing myself from his friends, the ones who might report back to him. Which sucks, because I actually like his friends. He seems to think we'll be friends again someday. But honestly, if I ever have to sit through another meal listening to him talk about himself, I don't know what I'll do. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.